Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today, we're looking at the Albario sector, an 8th Bright Jewel Command of the Outer Rim. Albario sector was the primary objective of 8th Bright Jewel Command during the Clone Wars. It was home to Scipio, homeworld of the moons. Scipio kind of sucks even for the moons though, so the plurality of their population is on, well, Coruscant, actually. You get a lot of weird stories like this where a species that makes up less than 1% of the population of Coruscant nevertheless has more members on Coruscant than on any other planet in the galaxy. But the moon planet with the highest population is Moonalinst, which is named after the moon, not the other way around. Scipio is home to all the moon's most ancient institutions, though, which includes being headquarters of the Banking Clan. The Banking Clan was officially neutral in the Clone Wars, and even got a deregulation wish list partway through the war, as the Republic sought to fund an expansion of the GAR. Everyone knew that capturing Albario sector would allow the Republic to apply more pressure to the Banking Clan to play according to the Republic's rules, so while the planet was never a military target, you didn't have to be in on the details of the CIS's Secret Council of Corporate Evil to know that securing Scipio system as firmly within Republic space would be a major win. After Yavin 4, seeing signs that the Empire's grip on the Outer Rim was crumbling, the Moons became low-key rebel supporters. The Rebellion didn't like to be associated with Separatists because the fact is the Seps were beaten to a bloody pulp and never allowed to fully recover, so the most powerful rebel allies were always going to be planets that were Republic loyalists yet also anti-Imperial, like Corellia and Alderaan. That meant no one was super eager to pressure the Moons into taking a more prominent role in the Rebellion, and the Moons were happy to limit their involvement to smuggling credits with forged chain codes to the rebels rather than anything more frontline. The sector capital world under the Empire was Eris, a rainforest planet of no particular importance chosen, I imagine, pretty much purely because it was never a CIS stronghold of any kind, and the Empire wanted to humiliate and disenfranchise the Moons as much as possible. They never officially declared the sector to be the domain of the Hodin or the Morishim, though, two other species with a significant presence in the sector. The Hodin homeworld of Moltok is not found in Albario sector, but they do have a major colony world called Enem Karo, which they settled in the High Republic era. During the Imperial era, Enem Koro became a battlefield between two other species in the sector. Records don't say which two, but we can be pretty sure it's the Moons and the Moorish because they're the only other ones here. The Empire suppressed the war by orbitally bombarding both sides because when given a dangerously chaotic situation where the restoration of order could win some genuine popular support in the Outer Rim, the Empire never fails to squander it with pointless cruelty and dim-witted heavy-handedness. Not a whole lot of records about the Moorish ever doing much. They were short, furry, and loud. And that's about all I can find about them. Even their participation in the war is speculative, drawn mainly from the fact that we know the two major sides were defined along species lines, neither of them were Hodin, and the Albario sector only has two other major species. Well, unless you count the Lurmans, native species of Mygeeto. Yeah, we finally got into the big one. Despite the build-up and being famous for looking neat, especially at night when illuminated by the artillery fires of the Clone Wars, not a whole lot happened on Mygeeto. The Moons colonized it, enslaved the native Lurmans, convinced the Republic that the Lurmans were non-sentient, so this was totally legal, and because Mygeeto was the second most important planet in the sector, the Banking Clan chose Mygeeto to officially go Sep, while Scipio remained nominally neutral. 8th Bright Jewel banged their head against that rock on 4 different occasions, and the 4th attack finally succeeded. At this point in the Clone Wars, the Separatists had been split into 4 different nations that weren't really capable of supplying one another on any significant scale, which means Mygeeto was the de facto capital of one of the 4 Separatist nations. They were already teetering on the brink of annihilation when Order 66 came down, and were one of the first remnants to go under during the reconquest of the Rim. The Banking Clan funded the Separatist droid armies, but you can't just transmute credits into battle droids. You need factories and raw materials and stuff, so unsurprisingly, the financial capital of the CIS didn't last long once Palpatine decided the war had served its purpose, and it was time to wrap things up. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Atravis sector and the 8th Bright Jewel Command of the Outer Rim. I mentioned over in Albario sector that the Hodin, though they have a significant colonial presence in Albario, didn't have their homeworld in that sector. That's because their homeworld of Moltok is in this sector. Atravis sector was the domain of the Hodin in the Old Republic. The sector governed according to their own laws and traditions. As with most sectors, they didn't really meaningfully persist through the Imperial era, with the Sector Moff allowed to override as many local laws as he liked in an emergency, and also allowed to declare what counted as an emergency whenever he wanted, answering to no one but the Oversector Command and ultimately, the Emperor. The planet Despair got a surprisingly twee name, considering they called it that because it was an Imperial penal colony / slave world used to build Death Star components. The planet was officially called Horus, but it was uninhabited before the Imperials built a slave dungeon there, so the New Republic officially labels it according to the Despair nickname, since the prisoners there were all disposed of following the completion of the Death Star. There's no inhabitants to argue with the New Republic about the name. Some stories say it was used to test fire the completed super laser, but this is definitely not true. People are getting Despair and Jedha mixed up. There's rumors of a planet called Gibella in this sector, an independent world whose native Dazori species are short, fuzzy little farmer creatures. The Imperials tried to subjugate the planet during the Imperial era, but it turns out the Dazori can shapeshift into 9-foot-tall bear monsters who splattered the advanced platoon. The Imperials didn't come back. Another legend tells of the Pirates of Iridium, who could disrupt shields with a legendary material called a power gem, a menace to the Outer Rim, that was destroyed by the Jedi early in the Clone Wars. A third legend claimed that planet Zeth-Lithel, an ocean planet orbiting Mark B's star, is inhabited by an unnamed but sentient species of dark green or blue-black seaweed that could cluster together to become intelligent. The story claims they lack contact with the greater galaxy because their method of communication and sensation are so alien that they barely understand that animal life is capable of intelligence at all. I think my favorite planet in this sector, though, is Mantooine, the manly planet. It's full of testosterone, I assume. Mantooine has an ancient enmity with planet Fest, and both planets had sectorist cells, that is, an anti-imperial resistance group whose goal was to achieve independence, protection, or revenge for a specific planet, system, or sector. Mantooine was home to the Mantooine Liberators and Fest to the Fest Resistance Group. The two were both anti-imperial but hostile towards one another. Mantooine was home of what could have been an early victory against the Empire, an uprising that sacked the local Imperial garrison before the Aldhani raid, but Imperial forces retreated to Fest, where the Fest Resistance Group was unaware that they were regrouping from a rout, and they neither struck the Imperials while they were weak nor warned the Mantooine Liberators of the coming counterattack. Once the Imperials regrouped, they returned to Mantooine, and without the advantage of surprise, the Mantooine Liberators were crushed and driven back into the wilderness. The Fest Resistance Group, having seen an opportunity to crush the Imperials throughout the sector slip through their fingers before they even knew it was there, reached out to the Mantooine Liberators to put their differences aside and work together going forward, forming the Atravis Resistance Group. The sector is named after Atravis system, which has 2 inhabited planets, Generis and Atravis 7, and the ARG set up their main base in an abandoned space station orbiting planet Generis. As is often the case with sector names, the planet the sector is named after isn't super important, neither are the other planets in the same system. The Atravis Resistance Group, having lost a huge chunk of their fighters when the Mantooine Liberators were counterattacked, went all in on espionage and reconnaissance. They were really committed to never being taken off guard again. They later joined the Rebel Alliance. That didn't really work out for them, though, because this part of the galaxy became deep Imperial remnant territory. The New Republic didn't completely give up on crushing Imperial forces after their victory on Jakku, as holdouts in places like Greater Maldrud and Dinon can attest, but the Spinward's Rim was a low priority, and 8th Bright Jewel in particular is a part of the galaxy where the Imperial remnant were really left to fester into the First Order. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at the Barca sector, an 8th Bright Jewel command of the new territories of the Mid-Rim. The Barca sector is where you'll find the Ubis of the Uba system and its 5 habitable planets, Uba 1 through 5. The whole Uba system is a wreck, and there aren't a whole lot of Ubis left, but Boosh the Bounty Hunter was Ubis, using bounty hunting to get off of his irradiated hellscape of a homeworld on Uba 4. It didn't really work out for him, since the Black Sun Syndicate killed him and Leia Organa took his armor to infiltrate Jabba's palace. I guess it worked out pretty great for the Rebels, though. They got Han Solo back, which was a big morale victory for a lot of the inner circle, since the loss of Han Solo was sort of the final defeat in the downward spiral that was the Mid-Rim retreat. Getting him back really helped signal that the Rebel Alliance had successfully regrouped from that loss and was ready to strike the Empire once more. You can tell how boring Boosh is because the only part he plays in this story is that some rebels found his armor. The reason why the Uba system is such a wreck is because they were Sith-aligned in the early-ish battles of the New Sith Wars, before government had completely collapsed, and Uba stockpiled weapons, including tons of weapons of mass destruction, throughout their system. Just like Balmorra is basically one giant weapons factory for the Republic in the core, the Uba system turned itself into one giant weapons factory for the Sith in the Outer Rim. The Republic made a preemptive strike against Uba to prevent the Sith from being able to use the weapons stockpile, but underestimated just how many WMDs were in the depots they were bombarding. They always knew that they were going to do most of their damage with secondary explosions, but they didn't realize those secondary explosions would result in a nuclear holocaust that would render most of the planets totally uninhabitable. And Uba 4, the one survivor, an irradiated wasteland barely capable of supporting life and some semblance of civilization. Unsurprisingly, while most of the new territories have quietly memory-holed their association with the old Sith empires and talk about how great the Republic is, the UBs hate the Republic with a passion to this day. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today, we're looking at the Braxant sector, an 8th Bright Jewel command of the new territories of the Outer Rim. The only notable planet out here is Anthan Prime, which is only notable because the space station Anthan Spire above is a luxury vacation resort for the hyper-wealthy. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Bright Jewel Sector in the 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Mid-Rim. Bright Jewel Sector is the domain of the Alina and home to their home planet of Aline. The Alina were once an industrial society, but after a great war with the subterranean tree species called the Kindalo, the environment was severely damaged, and the Alina agreed to near-total deindustrialization as a condition of the peace treaty between the two. The Kindalo retained control of the subterranean world, while the Alina retained control of the surface. They later settled another planet, Aline Minor, over in the Inner Rim, which they could industrialize to their heart's content, which means their homeworld of Aline is mostly inhabited by traditionalists who've chosen not to move somewhere more advanced. Not only could they just move to Coruscant like everyone else, they could move to another planet full of their fellow Alina, but with more land speeders and air conditioning, and they have chosen not to do that. Bright Jewel Sector is also home to Patite Patuna, home to a species of very small aliens called the Patites. Patites? I don't know, these guys aren't that important, I'm not looking up how to pronounce their name. They were ruled by a dictatorship until the Clone Wars, when the dictator was overthrown and replaced with democracy by Republic forces. Not as, like, an intentional political project of the Republic, the Patites were really small and Republic forces kind of accidentally overthrew the dictatorship as a result of misadventure. Nearby is Planet Balnab, where an unnamed squiddy species was ruled over by an alien con artist using a hologram, until Republic forces overthrew that regime largely by accident as well. This sounds made up, but pretty reliable sources swear it's true. Anubis is a colony world of the humans and Zabrak, which devolved into civil war for centuries, not between those two species in particular, mind you, but splintered between countless number of different factions that shifted and changed over the course of hundreds of years of warfare. None of the original factions survived to see the end of the conflict, and the whole planet's wilderness is booby-trapped to hell and back. Major highways and population centers are safe, and there is an actual economy, mostly based on mining and agriculture because planets are big, but there's been continuous full-scale warfare going on somewhere on the surface since the days of the High Republic. Numidian Prime is a technically inhabited planet, one of those ones that's mainly a smuggler port with a population of usually less than 100. The only reason anyone cares about it is because this is where Han Solo won the Millennium Falcon from Lando Calrissian in a game of Sabacc. But if you know this sector, you know I've been clearing all the small potatoes out of the way to build up to Ord Mantell, a Pius Dea ordnance depot from the early Republic days when hyperdrive sucked and it took weeks to get anywhere, so regular supply depots were needed to keep the Navy topped up with shields and shells. Ord Mantell is one of the only ones that's remained prominent even after hyperdrives improved and ordnance depots became unnecessary. During the Great Galactic War between the Republic and the Sith Empire, Ord Mantell's civil society broke down pretty much completely, as corruption scandals between planetary officials and the Sith caused the Republic to make several arrests, withdraw investments from the system for fear of embezzlement or seizure by Sith-aligned forces, and the common people lost faith in their government. There were secessionist movements seeking to become an independent system, which ultimately failed, but Ord Mantell's culture was permanently shifted towards a cynical, low-trust society where crime and smuggling flourished. Soon before the Clone Wars, the Jedi cleaned up the crime problem on the planet, but that order was new and fragile when the Clone Wars erupted, and soon slid back into the old ways as the Republic's attention turned elsewhere. Ord Mantell was the capital of 8th Bright Jewel Command, but as long as GAR command buildings weren't being targeted, the clone troopers weren't interested in maintaining local law and order in the planet's population at large. Especially since 8th Bright Jewel in particular was neck-deep in a knockdown, drag-out slugging match for control of the CIS stronghold of Megiddo and other vital worlds nearby. Ord Mantell is where clone troopers came to rest up and recover before shifting off back to the front lines. They weren't there to play cop. The clone army was so underinvested into Ord Mantell that when Clone Force 99 went rogue, the Imperials didn't even notice they were operating out of Ord Mantell for months. Once the Imps caught wind of them, though, they invested a ton of extra troops on the planet to try and smoke them out. It didn't work, but as the Moffs and troopers started to work out the details of the reorganization of the Republic, more material was invested into Ord Mantell to turn it into an Imperial oversector capital. As was often the case in the Mid and Outer Rim, the Empire never had anywhere near enough stormtroopers and Star Destroyers to occupy everywhere with direct military force, but they could at least put enough stormtroopers on the ground to intimidate all the local gangs into leaving Imperial assets alone, so they didn't end up being that much different from the GAR, except that where the Republic clone troopers had starports and bases built in the middle of nowhere to stay out of the locals' way, Imperial stormtroopers went on regular patrols through town to serve as a constant reminder of who was boss around these parts. The 8th Bride Jewel was part of a block of several oversectors that remained Imperial-aligned even after the defeat at Jakku, and the New Republic had been declared on Coruscant, but after watching the New Republic pummel Imperial remnants in Dinan and the Meridian sector, 8th Bride Jewel pulled back from the Mid-Rim, guessing, correctly, that the New Republic would be much less eager to send fleets to the Outer Rim. Broadly pro-Imperial core worlds who joined the New Republic because they saw the writing on the wall were already organizing the Centrist Party to demand the New Republic make peace with the Imperial remnants and wind down the military, and by retreating out of striking distance of influential planets like Coruscant and Chandrila, while simultaneously packing more firepower into what planets they retained control of, the Imperial remnants were able to dissuade the New Republic from committing to the several years of further war that would have been required to dig them out of the Outer Rim. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Carrion Sector in the 8th Bride Jewel Command of the new territories of the Outer Rim. That's a cool name for a sector. Planet Delifer was menaced by pirates, the Vexta Belt and the Vexta System, and eventually the Delifran militia had to bulk up their numbers and hunt the pirates down, with the help of Androphan Stormcaller, a Republic Navy officer in the Clone Wars who left the military after the end of the war. He didn't say as much at the time, but given he later joined the Rebel Alliance, it's probably because he wasn't cool with the Empire. Stormcaller is native to planet Antrala over in Velcor Sector, also an 8th Bride Jewel Command, and both Velcor Sector and Carrion Sector were left to the Imperial remnants after the New Republic was declared on Coruscant in order to bring a swift end to the war. Stormcaller never really forgave the New Republic for abandoning the Spinward Ring to continued Imperial rule, which I imagine has to have been exacerbated by how the New Republic was perfectly happy to jam its fleet down the throat of 12th Cerulean Spear in order to safeguard Admiral Akbar's homeworld over in the Slice. Sojourn, the so-called Hunter's Moon, got nuked by the Bando Gora in the late Republic era. No one's totally sure why. Legend has it there was a secret Sith stronghold on the moon, a laboratory run by Darth Plagueis, and that his apprentice Darth Sidious used the Bando Gora in a failed attempt to eliminate his master and take his place. Supposedly, this is when Sidious issued a burn notice on Kamari Vosa, the wayward apprentice of Count Dooku. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today, we're looking at Cassander Sector in the 8th Bride Jewel Command of the new territories of the Outer Rim. Probably the most famous planet in Cassander Sector is also practically deserted. Kaller is the planet where Jedi General Depa Billaba was killed during Order 66. It wasn't a super important planet. I'm honestly not sure why the CIS were invested so heavily in it, nor why the Republic sent a Jedi General and Clone Force 99 to dig them out. It's not too far from Megiddo, but I'm not totally sure why they couldn't just keep going to Megiddo. The Republic sector capital was B2, an agro-world and allegedly the homeworld of the Bituian species. They show up in an animated series about C-3PO and R2-D2, which is allegedly based on their exploits during the Galactic Civil War, but I'm pretty skeptical that the Empire ever sicked a giant pollution droid on the planet, only to be thwarted by 2 droids, a child, and whatever the fuck this thing is. R2-D2 and C-3PO did have some wacky adventures during the Clone Wars, but my guess is that this series is a mostly fictional extrapolation of that small handful of misadventures. Anyway, the Empire moved the capital to Cassander to minimize the influence of the Batuians in the Senate, but the Batuians joined the New Republic during the collapse of the Empire between Endor and Jakku, one of the only Bride Jewel systems to slip through the cracks, and the New Republic restored the old capital of B2. In addition to moving the sector capital from B2 to the sector's namesake of Cassander, the Imperials also split the sector into 3. The 3 sectors reunified in the New Republic, but retained subsector governments within the sector. Cassander tried to be a major trade hub to rival Ord Mantell, emphasis here on the word tried. The Tendrenan sector is capitaled out of the mining world of Isering, and sources can't agree on whether the Taldrin subsector's capital is Garki, an agri-world, or Minashi, an industrial world. None of them are all that special besides being current or former subsector capitals, though. The Outer Rim isn't as broadly choked by pirates as the HoloNet would have you believe, but certain specific parts of it sure are. 15th Hook Nebula is probably the piratiest place in the galaxy, but Cassander Sector here at 8th Bright Jewel had some pirates of the First Order supplied with weapons to try and destabilize Cassander Sector, so that the First Order could usurp control. 8th Bright Jewel hung together pretty effectively after the fall of the Empire as an Imperial remnant, so most of the region of the space was Imperial remnant territory that became First Order territory. Cassander Sector was an exception, and the First Order made some effort to mop them up before making their big move with Starkiller Base. This is one of those sectors where some stuff did happen, but none of it really added up to a specific story. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at the Chama sector, an 8th Bright Jewel command of the new territories in the Mid-Rim. In this sector is planet Darkon 3, a planet where a smuggler Danon Lifehold was once diverted to by an associate who was stalling for time to set up an ambush to double-cross Danon. The ambush didn't actually happen on Darkon 3, it was just a plausible place to need to make a stop. This is the closest thing to a story the sector has. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Clackus Sector and the 8th Bright Jewel command of the new territories of the Outer Rim. The Dactrurians are allegedly a species of some kind from planet Dactruria. As usual with species that share a name with their alleged homeworld while being totally undescribed, I suspect this is a planetary demonym mistaken for a species name. The only other significant planets here are Gwori, a major CIS shipyard feeding Megiddo's war effort, and which some sources claim was the largest CIS shipyard in the galaxy, though I'm not sure if that's true, and Quevron, an agri-world where a rebel sympathizer, Idu Tanfar, was killed by some stormtroopers, which was not very neighborly of them. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Korthenian Sector and the 8th Bright Jewel command of the new territories of the Mid-Rim. Korthenia Sector is named after planet Korthenia, allegedly home to the Korthenian species. There is no physical nor cultural description of this species whatsoever, so as usual, I suspect this is a planetary demonym mistaken for a species name. The only other notable planets here are Balthazar, where a Jedi task force was sent to try and defeat the Bando Gora, and instead they got wrecked and Komari Vosa was kidnapped and indoctrinated into the cult. She would eventually become their leader, and Ipsidon, a fairly insignificant mining planet where the Bad Batch once ran a mission to extract some Ipsium and a thief stole their ship. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Dantis Sector, an 8th Bright Jewel command of the new territories of the Outer Rim. Dantis Sector was deep Imperial territory in the Galactic Civil War and remains in deep Imperial Remnant territory to this day. It's home to several prisons and penal colonies like Dotamo Prison on planet Dontamo, a notorious slave prison that works its prisoners to death within a few years, and Heradan, an old penal colony from the Republic days that became independent, don't worry about how, and became a borderline lawless world as the former prisoners and their descendants gained more and more influence on the planet. Spalex was a planet the Empire mostly left alone, but which the Imperial Remnant and later the First Order took a more and more heavy-handed approach to during the run-up to their war with the New Republic. Black Squadron got sent to spy on the First Order there, and that mission was a debacle, but ultimately it was 4 pilots spying on a minor planet, so it didn't make a huge difference to the war. Back in the Galactic Civil War, the Imperials developed the TIE Phantom project in Dantis Sector, one of many efforts to create a super TIE that would outcompete the X-Wing, which got funded after the Battle of Yavin, when it suddenly became inescapable that the X-Wing was way better than the TIE Fighter, and that Star Destroyers being then uncontested as capital ships didn't really matter, since they were about as incapable of hitting X-Wings as X-Wings were of blowing up a Star Destroyer. Like most attempts at a super TIE, it was a stupid boondoggle chasing theoretical tech that sounded cool but probably wouldn't pan out. The TIE Phantom was supposed to be a cloaked starfighter made using the Stygium that the Sith Empire mined out of 8 and 2 over in Wild Space, but it turns out that 8 and 2 is really actually no joke out of Stygium. Some number of TIE Phantoms were made, but they either ran out of Stygium immediately or, as I suspect, never had any to begin with, and the guy in charge was lying to the Emperor to stave off execution. The TIE Phantoms were first deployed in orbit above the swamp planet of Drayton, ambushing a Corellian Corvette escorted by Rascal Squadron. Rascal Squadron and the Corvette were taken off guard and went down. The rebels regrouped on the planet and escaped to meet up with the rest of the fleet, where Admiral Akbar deployed them to track down the TIE Phantom project through the Aura asteroid belt, where asteroid bases were mining Iridium and Beryllium, and you'll notice that neither of those is Stygium, the stuff that can actually cloak ships. Rascal Squadron tracked the project down to its production facility on Imdar Alpha, where 2 pilots from Rascal Squadron infiltrated the facility, stole a TIE Phantom, and escaped, blowing up the entirety of the first batch. Despite the daring of the raid, the TIE Phantom's remote self-destruct was activated before the rebels could examine the technology closely. The TIE Phantom went on to be used to great effect in exactly 0 battles of the Galactic Civil War. None were ever recovered by Rebel or later New Republic forces, so we're not totally clear on what its defect was, but the Empire just never used them in significant numbers. My guess? They just didn't work properly. The Rebels were shook by the Battle of Drayton, but the Imperials didn't need a new superweapon to shoot down one corvette, and the cloaking might have been barely functional and still could have been pretty alarming through the fog of war. Alarming, but not especially more effective than a TIE fighter for the premium the Empire was paying for it. That's all speculation. It's also possible that every last trace of Stygium they were able to get their hands on was used in that first batch, which the Rebels blew up. But the Phantom never posed the threat to the Rebels that the Interceptor or the Defender did, so something was wrong with it. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're talking about Dohu Sector and the 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Mid-Rim. The only notable planet in the Dohu sector is Dohu 7, alleged homeworld of the Silica. The Silica are a mineral-based sentient species, and since they're unverified, I want to say that this is ridiculous. That's not how life works, but Vintians are somehow real. Anyway, real or not, Silica never really did anything, so there's not really a story to this sector. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're talking about Droma Sector and the 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Mid-Rim. This sector is home to Lanao, however you pronounce that, a fringe New Republic planet that the First Order briefly captured near the end of the Cold War, then lost again when the war went hot. The time from Starkiller Base opening the war against the New Republic and the First Order being destroyed was like 9 months, and while I'm sure that was a hell of a 9 months for Lanao, it says a lot about this sector that the most cataclysmic event that happened on it is that a minor New Republic enclave planet changed hands a couple of times during the war. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Denali Sector and the 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Outer Rim. Caspier 3 is the site of an Imperial remnant base that fell in with the First Order after they went public. According to rumor, intergalactic man of mystery Cal Katarn launched a rescue raid here about 10 years into the era of the New Republic to save one of Luke's new Jedi who'd been captured. Cal Katarn isn't even confirmed to exist, and while his alleged escapades as a rebel operative during the Galactic Civil War don't seem too far-fetched to me, I'm super skeptical of all his supposed Jedi adventures after the war. Still, nothing about this is particularly impossible. A minor Jedi from Luke's order got captured on a minor planet in the Imperial Remnant, and a rebel operative turned Jedi who might exist led a raid to sack the base and save the Jedi. It might have happened. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Fath Sector and the 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Outer Rim. Fath Sector holds Ord Cantrell, an old Pius Dea Ordnance Depot planet that got a second wind as a resort planet after hyperdrives improved and the whole Ordnance Depot system went obsolete. Then they got a third wind as capital of the Pentastar alignment that formed out of the 8th Bright Jewel Command after the New Republic was declared on Coruscant. The Oversector capital on Ord Mantell was abandoned in an effort to discourage the New Republic from committing forces to mopping up all of 8th Bright Jewel, and it worked, and the new capital was planted on Ord Cantrell for a while. It moved over to Antrala and Velcor Sector before long, though, and Velcor Sector remains the capital of 8th Bright Jewel Command through today, despite having briefly moved back to Ord Mantell during the reign of the First Order, before getting kicked back off of the planet after like 5 minutes. I've also heard rumors that put Earth in Fath Sector. Earth is, of course, famous for being the best planet in the galaxy, a biome layer cake that's like 8 planets in one and which uses wheeled vehicles instead of all you hovering weirdos, and which produces the best pop history edutainment content in the entire HoloNet. But it's definitely not located in Fath Sector. This planet has 8 billion inhabitants. We would not have slipped through the cracks if we'd been down the street from the capital of arguably the most durable and powerful Imperial remnant in the galaxy. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at the Glythe Sector and 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Mid-Rim. There are 3 sentient species native to Glythe Sector. Let's get the ones you've never heard of out of the way first. The Fef-Z are sentient insect swarms native to planet Fef, a jungle world teeming with far too much life. The Fef-Z are ordinarily non-sentient bugs individually, but can act as synapses in a distributed brain when they come together to form swarms. So a single Fef-Z is a swarm of 100-ish physically disconnected bodies. You can see why the Republic didn't realize these guys were sentient until long after they'd given Glythe Sector to someone else. The other species you've never heard of are the Vors of planet Vortex, a planet with very high winds pretty much year-round. These are Wingaling aliens who have, like, no interesting history. The most prominent thing I could find is that they built a really cool temple called the Cathedral of Winds, which resonates with tones with the winds, and which was destroyed when a B-Wing was shot down into it during a skirmish in the Galactic Civil War. The Vors didn't really mind. I'm not sure why the Vors don't have their own sector, but they do have representation in the New Republic as a planet, something that you usually only see in the core. The species you've heard about is the Zabrak of planet Iridonia, who also have a bunch of pretty major colony worlds all through this sector. Feldrona, Frithia, Iridia, Lorista. Iridonia and her colonies were close enough to the heart of Sith space and on an important enough hyperlane that they wound up on the front line of the Sith Wars a couple of times in the Old Republic era. Iridonia is an acid desert with thin strips of arable land and deep canyons, so the Zabrak who live there are pretty tough and have a culture of martial pride. That kind of thing doesn't do much when the enemy has artillery shells and you've run out, but backed up by the weapons production of core worlds like Balmora, the Zabraks were a rock that neither the Sith nor the Mandalorians were able to break through. The planet has been partially occupied, but never completely taken by force. Pretty good track record for being at a flashpoint in the Sith Wars. The Zabrak are one of several species fairly heavily associated with Jedi in this general region of space, alongside the Togruta and Keldor and nearby 7th Golden Disc Command. And the Zabrak kept their heads down along with the rest of them and hoped the Empire just ignored them, which it mostly did. The rebels did have a secret base on the planet Nedtan in this sector, a desolate planet with ruins left behind by an unknown species on it. The Imperials dug them out during the Mid-Rim Retreat, and Captain Brent Derlin led a raid to capture some Imperial landing ships and use them to evacuate past the Star Destroyer in orbit before they realized it was a captured ship. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Gradalis sector and the 8th Bright Jewel Command in the wild space of the Outer Rim. Technically, this isn't in 8th Bright Jewel Command. It was a special sector organized for Grand Admiral Thrawn to administer as the Empire of the Hand, a bit of wild space that Emperor Palpatine gave to the alien admiral as a personal domain where he wouldn't be strangled by Imperial speciesism and bureaucracy. That was all well and good, but it was one sector and not a great one at that, so it never really amounted to anything. It's famous because it was Thrawn's headquarters for a while, but all his ships and material came from the rest of the Galactic Empire. It was never a power unto itself, which should hardly be surprising. Emperor Palpatine may have given some extra leash to a vassal state, but he was obviously not going around founding independent nations, not even small and ideologically aligned ones. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today, we're looking at the Irishi sector and 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Mid-Rim. Irishi sector is the domain of the Jinha, a species native to the planet Obradan, which is a natural source of Cortosis ore. Cortosis is a lightsaber and blaster-resistant material similar to Beskar, although it's much more limited. Not only is it a weaker metal, making it comparatively easy to bend by hand, at least if it's thin enough, its energy absorption properties can also be overwhelmed with repeated strikes. Working Cortosis was illegal during the Late Republic, since it's presumed to be useful primarily to people who wanted to kill Jedi, but the Jinha started manufacturing it in secret for the Trade Federation not long before the blockade of Naboo. They would later supply it to the CIS. Records don't say if Obradan officially went SEP or not, but they definitely fell within Republic space early in the war, whether that was because of conquest or because they just never broke away at all. The stockpiled Cortosis, though, still allowed the CIS to field a couple of CB-3 Super Battle Droid variants made with Cortosis armor. They didn't have any special defenses against the Force, though, and they didn't have enough of them to make a huge difference. Irishi sector is on the border between the New Republic and the Imperial Remnant and later First Order, and Obrinda is right on the New Republic side of that border, so it became a flashpoint of tension both in the years after Jakku, when the New Republic and the Imperial Remnant hashed out an ad hoc border between them, one skirmish at a time, and during the Cold War between the New Republic and the First Order. The Imperial Remnant made a stand here to test New Republic resolve a few years after Jakku, and when the New Republic repelled the attack, the Remnant blamed it on a rogue Moff and left matters alone until the official declaration of the First Order in AD-06 of the Coruscant Reckoning, when they started skirmishing over the planet again. Obrinda fell to the First Order early on after the war between the New Republic and the First Order went hot, but just like everything the First Order did, it was a flash in the pan, quickly reversed. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Londori sector and the 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Outer Rim. Londori sector exists. Its capital is planet Londor, which sits at a hyperlane crossroads between Darkon, Valrar, Ariark, and Glee-Anselm, and you can tell a sector is boring when the only exciting thing about it is the way it can help you get to several other more interesting sectors. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at the Luke sector in the 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Mid-Rim. Luke sector is named after the Luke system, whose planet Luke 2 is known for very deep canyons. I guess that's neat. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Mano sector in the 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Mid-Rim. The Empire ran a prison world here on a moon literally called Captivity, a name which manages to be both really on the nose and not even that intimidating. There's not really a story here, though. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Mito sector in the 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Outer Rim. This is one of those sectors where there's a bunch of little stories that don't really add up to anything. Planet Ahakista's democracy was overthrown by the Empire to put pro-imperial elites in charge of the planet, establishing a heavily fortified complex called Pyramid 1, which the Rebel Alliance sent a cell to destroy, hoping to inspire the planet to rise up in the aftermath of the Battle of Yavin, when rebellions were spreading throughout the Outer Rim. The rebels didn't really have the firepower to destroy the pyramid on their own, though, so they had to cut a deal with the crime lord Reyes, and it still didn't work. Darth Vader did have to show up to personally crush the rebellion on the planet, though, so at least they get points for forcing the Empire to commit some pretty important assets to the planet. Dubrillion's king was overthrown by the nobility during the Old Republic era, and eventually the princess in exile Risha Drayan returned with the backing of her father, a pirate king, to reclaim the throne. The whole thing was rendered kind of moot soon thereafter when the planet was wrecked by the Eternal Empire. Dubrillion would later host a production facility for the second Death Star superlaser, which Rogue Squadron destroyed between Hoth and Endor, although this obviously didn't stop the second Death Star superlaser from being completed. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're talking about Obtrexta sector in 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Outer Rim. Obtrexta is home to Moonalinst. Moonalinst isn't the homeworld of the moon, that's Scipio, but Scipio kinda sucks, and Moonalinst is the moon planet with the highest population. Scipio was officially neutral in the Clone Wars, but Moonalinst was openly separatist and took a major branch of the intergalactic banking clan with them. The Republic made a priority out of recapturing the planet in the chaotic early days of the Clone Wars, and somewhat famously, the Republic captured the planet with surprisingly light losses when ARC troopers took out the primary cannons of the CIS in the capital city of Harniden. This early victory had some people hoping that the whole spinwards front of the war might get closed off really quick, and the Republic could swing its forces from there to Count Dooku's homeworld of Sereno and the CIS capital in the Tion cluster. But Megiddo was a tougher nut to crack, and in fact the CIS would lunge pretty deep into Republic territory once or twice in that early phase of the war when it wasn't yet clear where the front line of this theater was going to be, on the CIS doorstep of Megiddo or the Republic's doorstep on Ord Mantell. Once things stabilized, the front line wound up being closer to Megiddo than Ord Mantell, but the Republic had to bang its head against Megiddo for years before it finally fell. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Pacor sector in 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Mid-Rim. The Traval Pacor system is home to the Traval Pacor Institute of Technology, a local university that's perfectly good. It's a respectable institution and the degrees it gives out are valid. That's about the limit of the galactic significance of the Institute, the Travel Pacor system, or the entire Pacor sector. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're talking about Perrin sector in 8th Bright Jewel Command of the Outer Rim. Perrin sector is the domain of the Asogian species governed according to their traditions. The Asogians are part of the galactic community, they're in the Senate and stuff, but even in the time of the Late Republic, before the Empire disenfranchised a lot of aliens as much as possible, they were overshadowed in prominence in their own sector by the Power-On conglomerate, who rule the planet of Cantris Gola, and you can tell how influential the Asogians are that they're overshadowed in their own sector by a regional conglomerate who are only well known in like 5 sectors. This sector also has the dubious honor of being home to Son Tool, the home base and namesake of the Son Tool Pride, honorary 6th member of the 5 syndicates. Different oversectors had different approaches to crime in the Outer Rim. 14th Red Tails was basically in bed with it after they lost most of their Imperial funding when the Death Star project was moved away from Geonosis, while 15th Hook Nebula was fighting constant low-grade war against pirates. 12th Cerulean Spear mostly ignored organized crime, leaving Imperial subjects to fend for themselves against Hutts, Pikes, and Zygarians, and 8th Bright Jewel followed that model until the Battle of Yavin. Prior to Yavin, while some Imperial Organs like the Ubictorate took the rebels very seriously as a threat, most of the Empire considered them a nuisance, basically like pirates, a regional problem for specific oversectors to worry about. 4th White Cuirass's revolt on Mimban was not 8th Bright Jewel's problem any more than 15th Hook Nebula's pirate infestation was. After Yavin, all the Imperial oversectors very suddenly wanted to look busy. Emperor Palpatine loved to pit his underlings against one another, meting out terrible punishments to the losers and bestowing favor onto the winners, so every single oversector wanted to be doing the best job fighting the rebels, or at least not the worst job. And here the association between the rebels and space pirates and other organized criminal factions is relevant again, because 8th Bright Jewel Command didn't really have a significant rebel presence to target. They did eventually face a few planetary revolts, but right after Yavin, their problem was that they needed to look like they were doing something, and the Atropos Resistance Group hadn't really been a threat in years. Looking around for something vaguely rebel-shaped to destroy, Bright Jewel found the Sontul Pride and cracked down hard. After Jakku and the declaration of the New Republic on Coruscant, the Grand Moffs of the oversectors that hadn't already been crushed were trying to figure out exactly how much power they still held. Grand Moffs were effectively feudal dictators over their oversectors, answering to no one but the Emperor, so when the Emperor died, the immediate result was that each Grand Moff became a sovereign dictator over their own Imperial remnant, continuing directly from the oversector government, but no one knew how durable that situation was going to end up being. Oversector commands like 15th Hook Nebula and 14th Red Tails were chewed up pretty much immediately by internal rebellions, while commands that threatened New Republic strongholds were torn to shreds, like 7th Golden Nis, which threatened Coruscant and were destroyed at Bilbringi, and 12th Cerulean Spear that threatened Kashyyyk and Mon Cala and were destroyed at the Meridian and Anti-Meridian sectors. After watching what happened to 7th Golden Nis, 8th Bright Jewel focused on not being an appetizing target to the New Republic, which meant both keeping enough Star Destroyers operational despite the loss of Core World's industry and finance to be a credible threat, but also pulling their territory back from the homeworlds of popular Jedi-associated species like the Nautilins on Glianselm and the Zabraks on Iridonia. Figuring out exactly where that border was going to be was a process, though, and it was not a process of austere diplomats coming to a consensus in meeting rooms overlooking a planet from orbit as dawn crept up over the horizon. It was a process of, for example, 8th Bright Jewel cutting a deal with a slaver with a hideout on planet Gabrador 3 in the Mito sector to kidnap the children of the ambassador of the Power-On conglomerate to blackmail him into suspending his talks for the accession of the corporate-ruled planet Cantras Gola into the New Republic. The Red Moon mercenaries were hired to rescue the kids, and once his family was safe, the ambassador was unsurprisingly eager to join the New Republic under basically whatever terms Mon Mothma was willing to give them. This wasn't a major battle or anything. An Imperial strike team kidnapped some kids, and a small mercenary company raided a criminal hideout to rescue them, but these kinds of skirmishes are what pushed 8th Bright Jewel back from the Mid-Rim, convincing the Imperials that the New Republic might be willing to fight for this planet, but not for that one, until a border was unofficially recognized. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Prefspelt Sector, an 8th Bright Jewel command of the new territories of the Outer Rim. Prefspelt Sector has all kinds of weird planets. Karlak is a planet home to the Ming Po, allegedly a species native to the planet. I don't buy it, these are just humans who are on the short side. Height is genetic, you can have a country of kinda short humans without branching off into a new species. Also, the planet's total population is like 10,000, which is puny for a species homeworld. Death Watch took the whole planet over during the Clone Wars, and some Jedi and clone troopers came and fought them off, at great cost. The confirmed species in this sector, the official semi-sovereign rulers of the sector under the traditions of the Old Republic, are the Yagai species of Yaga Minor. They're insectoids with 3 legs who were enslaved by the Empire. As 8th Bright Jewel was skirmishing with the New Republic to determine where the border between the two nations was ultimately going to be, Yaga Minor was identified as a potential threat, since a revolt there could bite off Prefspelt Sector entirely and bring the New Republic into the Outer Rim. There's no physical reason why the New Republic couldn't advance into the Outer Rim, but the Rim boundary was the last obvious stopping point, so if the New Republic didn't stop there, they might just keep going until the Imperial remnant was completely crushed. The Imperial remnant backed off of their oppression of the Yagai in hopes of keeping things stable, although it's hard to say for sure how much of this reform was real and how much of it was just propaganda, especially once the First Order took over a few decades later. Speaking of the First Order, Haze Minor is a planet they targeted for abduction to fill out the ranks of their Stormtrooper Corps for years before they officially declared their existence. There's a ton of planets like this in the Imperial Remnant and unknown regions nearby, but this is the one that Rose and Paige Tico are from, so I guess that's neat. Rose is the dumbest rebel of all time, but she did show up to fight, and, I mean, that's more than most people in the galaxy did to fight the First Order, so... Another sort of confirmed species in this sector are the natives of Yorgrax, a planet conquered by a Sith exile who enslaved and ultimately exterminated the native species here during the Old Republic era. This was unknown regions back then, and Sith who lose power struggles in Sith space have a long tradition of retreating to the unknown regions with their remaining followers, becoming warlords out amidst the minor alien empires out there, and scheming to return to power. This particular exile was Quarlac Fornay, who bred an army of flying mutant raincords called Koloi, but by the time Quarlac finished making them, he was on his deathbed. It's not clear how many Koloi there were, but there are unconfirmed sightings of them as far away as Naboo and as recently as the Late Republic era, which suggests a breeding population does exist and has spread throughout the galaxy. The Trigas Corporation tried to set up a dirigible-based mining operation on planet Nosken, but it fell through. Why dirigibles? Gas giant mining platforms are a solved problem. Why are they trying to reinvent the wheel here? I guess maybe dirigibles are cheaper than repulsor lifts? Repulsor lifts are pretty cheap, so I find that hard to believe, but they're not free, so I guess it's possible. The Old Republic's primary naval academy was on Prefsbelt 4, established there after the overthrow of the Compispex dynasty that held the Supreme Chancellorship for generations during the Pius Dea era. The new academy was established as part of an effort to rebuild the Republic Navy from scratch, although Anaxes would eventually come to overshadow Prefsbelt in naval significance once more. Prefsbelt remained just on the Imperial side of the border between the 8th Bright Jewel Remnant and the New Republic, so it's become the primary naval academy for them once again, though this isn't a great pedigree for the Empire to be drawing upon, being the naval academy established specifically to reject the authoritarian, rabidly pro-human Pius Dea movement. The Republic under Pius Dea isn't the same as the Empire, but it had more in common with the Empire than it does with the New Republic. According to rumor, there was an Imperial bioweapons project on planet Conji 7 to create a zombie plague that escaped containment and took out the entire Star Destroyer Vector while it was making a milk run with various experimental samples for the project. That's a cool rumor, but also it was an entry in the ever-popular historical drama genre of holovids back during the big zombie craze, so maybe someone dug up a real zombie story to make a historical drama from, but also maybe they just made shit up. They do that sometimes, that's allowed. Speaking of weird rumors, I guess now's as good a place as any to address the Yuuzhan Vong. Borosk was one of the several Imperial remnant worlds allegedly invaded by the Yuuzhan Vong during a war that, very definitely didn't happen. The Outer Rim being what it is, I get why people fell for this early on, but insisting that there was an entire galaxy-spanning war that's been covered up is just, come on. That didn't happen. I said back in the 6 Black Sword videos that the Yuuzhan Vong might be a real species that crawled up out of the unknown regions to cause some trouble on the fringe of the Empire, and that's true here in 8th Bright Jewel as well, particularly the Outer Rim regions where the Imperial Remnant would have been very eager to cover up any signs of weakness. This would explain both why Yuuzhan Vong raids or even planetary invasions would have been disappeared from the galactic record, and why the power of the Yuuzhan Vong would have been exaggerated to the point of being a galactic threat. The Imperial Remnant didn't have its propaganda story straight and eventually settled on "it never happened," rather than trying to exaggerate the scale of the Yuuzhan Vong threat to avoid losing legitimacy for having been bloodied by them. The timing of the so-called Yuuzhan Vong War is also, right before the Cold War between the First Order and the New Republic began, so maybe it comes out of garbled reports of some dark side juju that the Knights of Ren were getting up to, or even just some weird hats they wore. I'm speculating madly here. The Empire is really opaque, and while the New Republic has declassified a ton of Imperial records from Coruscant that describe what Bright Jewel was doing during the Imperial era, information from the Imperial remnants after the liberation of Coruscant is limited to what leaks out of the assorted police states clinging to the Outer Rim. Anyway, story goes that the Yuuzhan Vong emerged from outside the galaxy in Dalnobian sector over at 9th Brazen Petard Command, and then swung spinwards through Moonalinst before the Imperial Remnant halted their advance at Borosk here in Prefsbelt sector, and I can't help but notice that the initial point of the invasion was conducted by crashing a moon into a planet rather than an actual planetary invasion, something which conveniently looks a lot like a gravitational natural disaster, that the Imperial Remnant's participation in the war is primarily in planets like Moonalinst and Borosk that are very close to the unknown regions, and that the years-long string of disastrous New Republic defeats throughout the Outer Rim and core are all things that definitely, verifiably did not happen. So, My outside guess is that the Yuuzhan Vong conquered Munalinst and Bastion and maybe even got as far as Dubrillion. Eighth Bright Jewel spun a wild story about a galaxy in crisis to avoid admitting that their Imperial remnant was so small and weak that it was at risk of being finished off by a minor alien empire from the unknown regions, and then the Imperial remnant broke the invaders at Borosk and their propagandists put a bow on the whole crisis and swept it under the rug, putting the whole embarrassment behind them to focus on the emerging First Order. I also find it notable that supposedly children of Han Solo and Princess Leia fought the Yuuzhan Vong and humiliated themselves early on, but later became heroes of the New Republic's belated efforts to fight the alien menace, and that this happens to take place at the exact same time when Ben Solo left Luke's New Jedi Order to join the Knights of Ren. Still speculating, but the timeline for so-called Jason Solo's role in the narrative, switching from fuck-up to hero, happens to map really well to the time when Ben Solo went rogue and became Kylo Ren. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Kilura sector and the 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories in the Mid-Rim. There was no interdiction technology during the Clone Wars, so while it wasn't a great idea to attack an enemy planet after a long and energy-hungry hyperspace trip to arrive comparatively low on power, and also further from reinforcements and resupply than your target, you could do it. Your ships would arrive, and they would still have enough power left for a fight at all, and General Grievous even took advantage of this to sneak up on Coruscant and kidnap Chancellor Palpatine. He was using a hidden hyperspace route, which meant that not only did his attack arrive, the Republic didn't even know it was coming until it was already happening, which helped. And also the whole plan was to get a single high-value target and then leave without attempting to destroy the Republic forces there, which meant that it wasn't a problem that their ships were going to run out of power for maneuvering shields and turbo lasers much faster than the Republic's were, because the plan was to be gone before that happened. I bring this up because this kind of thing happened accidentally all the time in Bright Jewel, which was a patchwork of Separatist and Republic planets and covered in shipyards capable of repairing and resupplying capital ships. That meant that the front lines took a long time to stabilize, and often one side or another would start a major battle they had no hope of winning because they guessed which planets were going to be able to provide supplies, and they guessed wrong. The Republic was hitting planets like Munalinst on Megiddo's doorstep in the first few weeks of the war, but several months later the CIS were deploying a moderately large invasion force onto planet Kilura in order to deny Republic supply bases near Ord Mantell. No supply bases nearby means the Republic can't sustain a ground defense. This turned out to be way overambitious. The CIS were never even close to isolating Ord Mantell like this, but back in the early days of the war, neither the Republic nor the Separatists realized that. Kilura is an agri-world with less than 1 million inhabitants in Republic census data. The planet is also home to a species of sentient, shape-shifting predators who felt no need to announce themselves to initial Republic explorers and who announced themselves to Republic settlers by killing them. They were never super organized about it, though, which is why Republic settlements persisted throughout the High Republic era and into the Clone Wars, when the CIS showed up to stamp down a decent-sized droid army on the planet. The Kiluran shapeshifters sided with the clone troopers to help see the CIS off, but only if the Republic agreed to remove their settlers afterwards. The Republic agreed, but anyone who had greater knowledge of the strategic situation could have told you that they never really planned on following through. For one, the settlers on Kilura weren't really settlers anymore. The core settlements had been there since the High Republic. People were born and raised there and wouldn't leave without use of force. For two, Kilura is an agri-world. It's not useful to the CIS war effort. They only wanted to capture it to take it from the Republic. If it was abandoned by both sides, that was as good as a CIS victory. After the Republic broke their promise, though, the shapeshifters of Kilura started using their powers to infiltrate Republic forces and feed intel to the CIS. After losing a ship to an ambush because of Kiluran interference, the Republic reluctantly agreed to hold up their end of the bargain, sending in clone commandos to remove the Republic settlers by force if necessary. They used commandos because the whole operation had to be kept off the books. Strictly speaking, the whole thing is just a rumor, so it could just be separatist propaganda, but I don't know, nothing about it seems implausible to me. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Rayobalo sector, also known as Ox Space, in the 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Outer Rim. I say it's an 8th Bright Jewel Command, but this is one of those annoying sectors that gets cut in half by over-sector lines. The capital planet of Gravlex Med is actually under the protection of 9th Brazen Petard. Now, I do understand why it was split up this way. The over-sector commands were established for the Grand Army of the Republic during the Clone Wars, and only became political units when the galaxy was reorganized into the Empire, at which point the over-sector commands went from being areas of military responsibility to units of military dictatorship. Grand Moffs went from being in charge of fleets and armies to being in charge of the planets those fleets and armies guarded. 8th Bright Jewel includes the Coruscant Dantooine hyperlane because control of that hyperlane was important to isolating Megiddo, while Gravlex Med is left under 9th Brazen Petard because Gravlex Med was a loyalist planet in the Outer Rim who needed all the help they could get, and Brazen Petard had a lot less on their plate, so they could prioritize defending far-flung loyalists where 8th Bright Jewel really had to focus on Megiddo. It makes sense, it's still annoying. Gravlex Med is the homeworld of the Onks, these kind of stooped shouldery guys that you might recognize. They're one of those species that most people don't know the name of, but you've seen them in like crowd shots of news broadcasts and stuff. The Onks use orbital cannons to fire themselves into space and break the barrier into hyperspace, a weird and awesome form of hyperdrive that they use to colonize planets like Onks Minor before contact with the Republic. During the early Republic era, when Onks space was not in contact with the Republic, they ran into the Shusugant, a warlike species from a planet of the same name, who fairly quickly conquered the Onks and brought many of them to their home planet. Now, records claim that both Shusugant and Gravlex Med are high-gravity worlds, but also that the gravity difference between them seems to have informed the Shusugant's ability to maintain dominion over the Onks. One story claims the Onks slaves brought to planet Shusugant all died, and it does not say exactly why Shusugant control over Onks space disintegrated, although the Shusugant are prone to internecine feuds, so it might have just been that the death of a powerful hierarch led to internal fighting over a successor, during which time outer regions broke away. Another story claims that the Shusugant were able to conquer Onks worlds with lower gravity, but were unable to live or fight effectively on Gravlex Med due to its higher gravity, thus saving the Onks from total conquest. Either way, the conflict was ongoing when the Republic showed up. The Onks were friendly to the Republic, and the Shusugant were not, and that went really poorly for the Shusugant. The Republic never conquered the Shusugant home planet, but they did turn all the surrounding space over to the Onks in the newly organized Rayo Balo sector, which included not only traditional Onks planets like Onks Minor, but also all of the surrounding unclaimed space, including planets like Dantooine. Republic exploration into the new territories was sporadic throughout the Old Republic era, and Rayo Balo sector got added as a complete sector long before the surrounding space because the Onks had already explored a bunch of it when the Republic made first contact, so it was an organized sector surrounded by tons and tons of wild space for most of the Old Republic era. This was a problem for them because of the habit of Sith who'd lost internal power struggles in the Sith Empire packing up their stuff and fleeing into wild space to find some undiscovered planet to colonize, rebuild their power base, and return 20 years later with an army of loyal followers born and raised in a society built around absolute obedience to a single glorious leader. This didn't usually work out for the Sith exile because it turns out one generation of colonial subjects isn't usually enough to take on rivals who control the entire Sith Empire, but it means that the Sith were pretty heavily invested in the region. Rayo Balo sector was fully explored, so the Sith didn't ever do the exile colony thing there, but whenever the Sith Empire bubbled over its borders, it tended to expand rapidly into the new territories and cut Onks space off from the rest of the Republic, and the Onks had to stand against the Sith alone. They were at the limits of the Sith Empire's reach, though, which meant by the time the Sith conquered the surrounding territory, they were always focused on defeating the Republic, which made Onks space a lower priority. That didn't save the planet Nekka from getting virus bombed to oblivion by Revan's Sith Empire, but Onks space was never fully conquered by any Sith Empire. Dantooine is probably the most famous planet in the sector. It's an agri-world with a small population, but it's also one end of the Coruscant Dantooine hyperlane, which made it important to cutting off Megiddo from CIS forces in Sereno and their primary forge worlds in the near Dai-Tiran cluster, which is why the Republic fought a decent-sized droid army there in the Clone Wars. According to the story, Mace Windu punched like 1,000 super battle droids to pieces during the battle, which that probably didn't happen. I'm not even sure if Mace Windu was there, but I mean it's possible. Mace Windu led 1st Systems Army, which included 1st Azure Hammer and 2nd Green Mantle, who were in charge of the defense of Coruscant and Corellia respectively. These planets were so rarely threatened that in practice they were reserve forces sent wherever they were needed, which is why Mace Windu shows up all over the galaxy during the Clone Wars. Jumping back in time, Dantooine was also targeted in the war with Revan's Sith Empire. It was home to a small Jedi temple and otherwise sparsely populated, so it was the Jedi temple and the Rakatan ruins that put it on the Sith radar. Those Rakatan ruins also mean the planet must be naturally dark-side aligned, since the Rakatan hyperdrive could only take them to planets with a dark-side alignment. You might think that means the planet is somehow naturally evil, but if you look at dark-side planets, it's like Kashyyyk, Duro, Dantooine, Manan, Tatooine. Some of these places suck, but a lot of them are nice. From what I can tell, planetary force alignment has a bigger effect on force sensitives, who are rare enough to get swamped by other trains in the population in terms of impact on society, but a place like Dantooine will train a much higher proportion of Dark Jedi than normal. Exar Kun, Revan, and Malak were all trained at the Dantooine Temple. Dantooine is also allegedly home to a species of thickly proportioned primitive humanoids called the Dantari. I call bullshit. There's no trace of them anywhere in the rest of the historical record, and they're caveman aliens. Caveman aliens came up a lot in the 12th Cerulean Sphere, where they were especially unlikely because that territory was mostly settled in the early Republic era, sandwiched as it is between the Republic, Hutt Space, and the Tion Cluster, the three major powers of that era. But the new territories aren't that much more likely, especially not when we're so close to the traditional borders of Ankh space. Dantooine has never been a major planet, but they've been part of the greater galactic community for long enough that any local species should have figured out air conditioning by now. I guess Tuskens still haven't figured out speeders, so nothing's impossible, but these Dantori guys do not have the documentation the Tuskens do. Dantooine is also famously the site of a rebel base early in the Galactic Civil War. An Imperial plot to track their base down failed a few years after the Aldani raid, which spooked the rebels into relocating to Yavin, just in case there was some other tracking device they'd missed along with the one they found. There wasn't, and the Imperials didn't learn about the Dantooine base until Leia Organa bluffed with it while held captive on the Death Star. There's all kinds of crazy rumors about stuff that happened in or around that base. Supposedly, there was a secret Jedi cloning facility beneath it, trying to find a way to clone Force sensitives without them going bug-fuck-insane. Supposedly, one of the many Imperials who defected to the rebellion in the aftermath of Yavin was captured while trying to leave Imperial forces on Dantooine, and Wedge Antilles' rogue squadron, including Luke Skywalker, saved him. Supposedly, Darth Vader was captured by the rebels and held prisoner on Dantooine. That definitely didn't happen. He obviously would have told the Imperials about the base after escaping, so it wouldn't have been news to Tarkin that the Dantooine base was abandoned. Some of these stories are plausible, not that one. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Relgim Sector and the 8th Bright Jewel Command, the new territories of the Outer Rim. Ordnance Depot planets were established in the early Republic era, especially by the Pius Dea Chancellorships, in order to act as regional supply bases in an era when hyperdrives really sucked and it could take weeks or even months to get from Coruscant or Kuat or Balmorra out to the edge of Republic territory. Relgim Sector has two of these, Ord Trasi and Ord Benir, the endpoints of the arm of exploration and supply reaching into the new territories from Ord Mantell and the Mid-Rim. Despite being established early on, the Republic didn't end up making much use of these for the rest of the early Republic and even most of the Old Republic era, and the new territories were mostly settled during the High Republic period. Normally, this kind of galactic scale view of history is used as a setup for zooming in on something more specific to Relgim Sector, but nah, nothing ever really happened out here. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at the Thori sector and the new territories in the Mid-Rim. This sector exists, even including rumors and legends. That's all there is to say about it. Not every sector has a story. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Tiala Sector, an 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Mid-Rim. Tiala Sector is one of the sectors that the CIS hit early on in the war when they were hoping to isolate Ord Mantell for an invasion. Like most of Megiddo's early skirmishes into the Mid-Rim, it was a plan drawn up under the assumption that the droid army would be fighting disorganized sector security forces, and which fell apart when the Republic pulled a clone army out of its ass. The droid forces were formidable, but they were operating thousands of light years from the nearest friendly planets and had been relying on quickly consolidating control over multiple sectors to hold that territory. When the clones showed up and gave them a fight, it turned into a losing battle almost immediately, and CIS forces pulled back to Megiddo to adopt a defensive posture for most of the Clone Wars. The Battle of the Planet To'Olan was like most of these battles, a sudden flash in the pan when droid armies deployed in overwhelming numbers to overrun the planet, met by clone forces who dug in hard to prevent the droids from securing that quick victory they needed, and winning the day as droids started running low or out of power because their supply lines were stretched way too far from the closest friendly planet of Megiddo. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Tyan Sector and the 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Mid-Rim. This sector sure does exist, and there's even a name on record for the representative in the Senate during the late Republic era. Senator Galim Edawan represented the sector about 50 years before the Clone Wars. His daughter was killed by Lorian Nod, a Jedi who'd been childhood friends with Count Dooku before being drummed out of the Jedi Order when none of the Knights or Masters would take him as an apprentice. I guess he sucked at being a Jedi. Lorian Nod became a space pirate and sought revenge against Dooku in particular, envious of Dooku's superior abilities, and attacked a Republic consular cruiser containing Senator Galim Edawan's daughter, killing her and all others aboard, and then using the ship as bait to lure in the nearest Jedi to investigate the emergency. Jedi Knight Dooku and his apprentice Qui-Gon Jinn. Turns out a pack of space pirates led by a failed Jedi who never made apprentice, let alone knight, was not much of a match for a proper Jedi Knight and Padawan apprentice. Sure, the pirates had numbers, but space pirates aren't actually that eager to die for their captain's revenge schemes. None of that actually happened in Taiyan Sector. It was in the middle of deep space, and it involved someone from Taiyan Sector, which is as close to a story as this sector's got. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Vadagult Sector and the 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Mid-Rim. It's feast or famine in 8th Bright Jewel, sometimes talking about planets like Dantooine or Ord Mantell that swirl with history and legend, other times talking about Vadagult Sector, which may as well be a blank spot on the map. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Velkar Sector and 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Outer Rim. This was the capital sector of the Pentastar alignment for most of its history, probably the biggest and most powerful of the Imperial Remnants, which became the core of the First Order after it was formally established from the Imperial Remnants. A lot of messed up Imperial shit the Empire used to do, mostly off the radar to keep the core worlds from joining the rebellion, gets done out in the open here because the core worlds aren't in the Imperial Remnants, so there's nobody to cover things up for. And none of this stopped pro-Imperial core worlds from joining the First Order. Most of them continue to insist that Velkar Sector's crimes were New Republic propaganda, despite the fact that, the First Order wasn't even denying it. They're terrorist fanatics who joined the Imperial Remnant after its crimes became common knowledge. The Empire never hid anything from them, not successfully at least. They signed up because they are pro-slavery and they brag about all the slavery they do, and yet Tin L4 still expected us to believe that it wasn't happening. So, Ryloon was a planet whose orbital factories ran on prison slave labor. Endex is a planet in Velkar Sector whose insectoid native inhabitants, the Entomals, have been enslaved by the Imperial Remnant and are used for gas mining on Bexstar by the Amber Sun Mining Corporation. The Entomals were skilled pilots who would set up canyon races to test their skills, and that would draw in pilots with something to prove from across the galaxy back in the Old Republic era, and there's wreckage in the canyon from centuries of crashes, maybe even millennia. People do sweep through to scavenge the canyons periodically, but not in any organized fashion, so it's hard to say for sure how old the oldest wreck is. The practice was officially outlawed by the Empire, probably to keep people off-world while they enslaved the planet in secret, a secret which became more and more open and is now just completely common knowledge. Charuma is one of the planets that rebelled against the Empire after Yavin, when the Imperial grip on the Outer Rim was disintegrating after the 1-2 punch of the Empire destroying its legitimacy by using the Death Star on Alderaan, and then almost immediately losing the Death Star, proving that even their most powerful weapons could be defeated. The story goes that Charuma rose up after some rebels rescued their High Shaman from Kessel and brought back some kind of artifact staff of cultural significance. The planetary revolt was successful initially, but got cleaned up after Jakku when the Pentastar alignment was consolidating their control, especially near their new capital of Entrala. Entrala itself is close to the border with Wild Space and was kind of a weird choice for capital of the First Order, especially since they had a bunch of core world defectors to work with, like Arcanus and Kuat. Partly the reason for this choice was to keep the capital deep within their territory in the Spinwards regions of the Outer Rim, but also it's because the First Order was copying the old Sith trick of running to the unknown regions of space to rebuild power before returning to the galaxy. With about the same level of efficacy as that trick did for exiles from the Sith Empire, really. They built enough power to throw a shocking sucker punch, but they can't sustain the attack because they're trying to fight the galaxy with one planet, and after they've spent their resources on the first sudden shock, they've got nothing to follow up with. Entrala is still capital of what's left of the First Order, the Imperial Remnant, if you will, but no telling if that's going to last. Maybe after losing the core for half a second, the New Republic is finally done treating the Imperial Remnant with kid gloves. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Vork Sector and the 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Mid-Rim. Vork Sector is the domain of the Vicon species of the planet Vikondor. I can't find a picture or illustration of them, but they're about 3 or 4 feet tall and have long twitchy noses, so I am imagining some kind of mole-looking people. Vork Sector is also home to planet Junction 5. Junction 5 is not a very important planet, but it is the home world of Lorian Nod, the galaxy's most entertaining fuck-up of a villain. Lorian Nod was arrested by then Jedi Knight Dooku for attacking a Republic ship carrying a senator, But apparently that didn't get him much of a sentence in the late Republic, because a few decades later he was out and causing trouble on Junction 5, spreading rumors that their inhabited moon, Della Luna, was working on a secret weapon called the Annihilator, which would be able to destroy Junction 5. It's not super clear what the Della Lunanites were supposed to do with this weapon, like they're a moon. Surely if they destroyed the planet they were orbiting, the gravitational and atmospheric consequences would be catastrophic for them. The whole story was made up, though, and Lorien Nod was run out of power and imprisoned again after it came to light. After another 20 years imprisoned, he was released and became the leader of Junction 5 again. They just couldn't get enough of this convicted criminal who constantly lied to them in order to consolidate his own personal power. He crossed Dooku again, this time as a planetary leader refusing to join the Separatist Alliance, and this time around Dooku was a lot less Jedi about the refusal and killed Lorien Nod. Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at the wild space near 8th Bright Jewel Command. Planet Adumar was colonized by exiles from the early Republic era. They never really explored the space near their home, but they built a pretty heavily industrialized society on the planet. According to rumor, the New Republic and the Imperial Remnant fought a proxy war over the planet, with the Remnant backing the most powerful nation on the planet, Kartan, while the New Republic organized an alliance of other Adumari nations into the Adumari Union to defeat the takeover. According to the story, this took place about 7 years after the Battle of Jakku and the official end of the Galactic Civil War, but it's all unconfirmed, so firstly, maybe it didn't happen at all, but secondly, if it did happen, I think it might have been much later than the story records. It sounds a lot like something that would have happened during the Cold War between the New Republic and the First Order. According to rumor, planet Alishan is home to an underground civilization protected by some kind of kaiju known as the Sentinel or the Guardian. Rebels poking around for a new secret base after the Battle of Yavin stumbled across the city and were chased off by the Guardian. The Guardian is said to have the powers of shapeshifting, teleportation, and the record here just says, the power to operate a destructive super laser. There's more detailed records, but I'm not super concerned about the details of this story. It's probably just a rumor anyway, and if not, the exact powers of the Guardian are not important to galactic history, so I'm going to assume it fires the super laser out of its mouth like Godzilla. Aten-2 is a planet once rich with stygium, a material that can be used to create cloaking devices. This is super rare and valuable, and during the Cold War between the Old Republic and the Sith Empire, the Sith found the planet and set up shop. Some Sith defectors brought the orbital fortress's defenses down from within, and the Republic captured the planet. The stygium all got mined out ages ago, so the era of cloaking devices is over, but people occasionally chase rumors of cloaking tech, including the Confederacy of Independent Systems. The Republic and the CIS fought over Aten-2, but the rumor is that the Drayton Nebula itself somehow consumed both parties. Personally, I suspect that the CIS won, realized the stygium was all gone, and left. The Pandaren warriors helped the Republic fight the CIS at Aten-2. No record on who those guys were, except that they stuck with the Jedi after Order 66. The clones wiped them out along with the Jedi, but it was a lot more of a fight. That was all after Aten-2, though. No record of exactly where they were during Order 66, so I'm talking about them here. Imperial Admiral Sarn tore huge gashes into Aten-2 trying to find more stygium to make the cloaking TIE Phantom, and the records swear he succeeded, but the TIE Phantom basically never shows up in any records after Rascal Squadron destroyed the first production batch, and while it's possible that all remaining stygium was used in that first batch, I'm pretty sure Admiral Sarn was just lying through his teeth. Authoritarian nations are prone to this kind of thing. Some idiot in upper command gets it in his head that there's still stygium in the mantle of Aten-2, so he convinces Emperor Palpatine to give him the resources needed to tear the crust open looking for it. There's nothing there, but there's dire consequences for failure, so he lies and says he found some and he's producing TIE Phantoms with it. He makes fake TIE Phantoms to string the Emperor's inner circle along while he searches desperately for some kind of escape hatch, and when he doesn't find one in time, Darth Vader chokes him to death.